Hi there, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. This is the Ask the Experts Q&A. So that means it's a little bit more interactive, a little bit less structured, a little bit more fun, but we're going to be having it all around the topic of reviewing tender documents. So how do we do that? Let me introduce myself quickly first. My name's Andrew Watson. I'm the Bid Consultancy and Training Manager here at Proactis. So helping our clients as much as possible to be as successful as possible putting together, submitting, and securing contracts through public sector tendering as a primary function. So I look after the team of guys here that does that. So we're breathing, living and breathing this stuff on a day in day out basis. So hopefully we can add some value and give you some tips and guidance across the course of this webinar. I'll let my colleague Alistair introduce himself as well.
Hi, I'm Alistair O'Donnell and I'm the bid manager in Andrew's team.
Thank you, Alistair. We're a little bit more relaxed. The last webinar we did was a bit more formal all around the Procurement Act. So, but this one is supposed to be a Q&A. We do really want your questions to come in. If I can navigate the technology, then I will look at the questions and certainly do get them asked. And what we'll try and do is go through those questions as they do come in. So there's a chat function, there's question function. Do start pushing them in from now, and we'll try and spend some time. That is the main focus. We'll try and spend as much time as we can during the webinar going through those things and making sure we're addressing the questions, the issues around this topic of how do I deal with tender documents, how do I get the reviews, how do I interpret and interrogate them as best as possible. So do start punching in your questions. The first question that gets asked in every webinar, Alistair, what's the first question that everyone asks in a webinar?
Can we have the slides?
Can we have the slides? We'll do you one better. You can have the recording. So the recording will be made available to you. So yeah, do look out for that coming through to your email in the coming couple of days. But you will get access, so you can have the pleasure of rewatching it at your leisure and do as many screen grabs as you like. We know that's what you're for. You don't want to listen to us. You just want the screen grabs, folks. It's okay. It's okay. We're thick-skinned. Okay. Um, in terms of the format for the session, we've got 45 minutes, which are going to tick away really quickly. We're going to spend a little bit of time, a little bit of an overview, just kind of setting things up, some general points and some information you want to be thinking about when you're considering that kind of interrogation piece around reviewing tender documents, some general good practice pieces, and we'll try and tech and my tech skills permitting, we'll try and do a little bit of an exercise around that too, just to make that a little bit more three-dimensional, a little bit more apparent. What we'll do is we'll look at some of the questions then that have come in already as part of the registration process. There is a good number of people on the webinar, so there were loads of questions. So we've tried to bunch together some of the themes around those and address some of those that seem to be relevant for people. And then we'll love to take some live questions as well. So do get punching in those live questions from kind of now as well. And then we'll just talk about the very last steps as well. So the tech's working. If everything's there, we should be on to the first step slide. Alistair, can we give a bit of a framework, a bit of guidance, kind of set the scene for people in terms of the sorts of things they want to be thinking about, basically as soon as they dive into a tender pack?
Yes, let's let's do that. This is a Q&A webinar, so I do want to keep the babble to a minimum, but I think that this is important just to set the scene. Um, After Andrew's introduction, we won't babble for too long. But certainly from the registrations and the Excel sheet that we've got with your questions, there are some self-confessed beginners. So I think it's worth just setting the backdrop for 10 minutes really, and then we can get into the questions. So let's do it. So when assessing a tender, these are some steps that you should take. Now, these aren't exhaustive. There will be more things that you can do if you've got more time, more resource, but certainly a good starting point is consume the tender pack, read the tender pack. Now, again, we live in this realm of best practice, these romantic notions of being able to read everything every single time that you want to bid. The real life situation that we're in is that you're not always going to have that luxury, especially if you are just trying to find a bid no bid decision. If you're looking for a reason to get rid of something, or if you need to get through a couple of them, you need to do that with a bit of pace to protect your time, protect your resource. So Read the ITT as a, tender packs can go up to 30, 40, multiples of documents. So the invitation to tender, the ITT, that's your Bible. That's what you want to be reading first. Okay. So it's a fairly labor intensive role if you're a bid writer, bid manager, if you're within the public sector procurement sphere. Fairly labor intensive that you do really need to be reading quite a lot of these documents. So the ITT is um, is the place to start. The ITT, it's the context, it's the backdrop, it's the shape of the bid. Okay, it lets you know what you're being asked to deliver, where, to whom, under what conditions, and to what standards. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot more information than that, but it really gives you the shape and the scale of the tender opportunity. So worth knowing. It will also, or should also, give you a little bit of context to the buyer and the need behind the opportunity. Why do we need to procure more, healthcare nurses in Bradford? Why do we need to, train more teachers in Glasgow? The why really helps you lean into aligning the analysis of the benefits of your system with known client priorities or geographical priorities. So it's really good to get this backdrop. It's really good to get this context. So certainly start with the ITT. I would add to that any specification documents as well if you're looking at a technical tender, if you're in construction, um, anything like this. This will tell you basically methodology, how they want it done, how they expect it to be done. Do you need to consider building occupants remaining in situ? Do you need to consider out of hours working if you're working in a school? Maybe your delivery and drop off times can't coincide with the school's collection and pickup point. So just these little details help you decide, is this for us? Is this something that we can do? And is it something that we want to do? So moving on, are we compliant? Is this something that you can compliantly bid for? Some tender opportunities have minimum turnover thresholds. Some have insurance requirements of a certain value, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million pounds. Some might be in an area that you're just not interested in working in, or you can't get teams to, or don't have an established supply chain in. So again, find this information out and it will lead you to the decision of, is this for us or not? To the backdrop of trying to do this with a bit of pace, we've got a bid no bid decision matrix, which I don't know if I should say this or not. 1308, it's up, it's on the webinar. So if you take it now and run, we'll know that it was 1308. So we'll be able to see this drop off on the webinar, but it's up. Have a poke through it. I've got a bit of an embellished one. So if you want to drop us an email, I can send you a chunkier one. But certainly for a start, have a look at that, and it should just help you pick out the pertinent information from the tender pack that aligns with these questions and really gives you the answer that you're looking for. The way
Alistair,
I do it,
I was
oh,
just gonna say, hopefully that's clear. Seeing as we've mentioned it, there should be like you should see like an icon within the window that's got like obviously like an obvious attachment symbol, and then from there you can click and download it. We'll definitely get in trouble from the marketing guys for saying that at 1308, but never mind. We're here to give.
yeah, we are. So yeah, certainly bid no bid, looking at your compliance. The way that I like to do it is exception reporting. Okay, so looking for red flags. Look at these minimum financial thresholds and check that you comply. Look at your minimum required insurance levels and check that you either have these or can augment your existing insurance coverage to attain these by contract commencement. There might be costs involved in that you might not be willing to leverage. So again, leading you to the decision. Now, some elements of compliance need to be in place in order for you to submit a compliant bid. However, there are allowances for other pieces of evidence, insurance being one of these, where you only need to have this in time for contract commencement. Now, it's a protection for companies speculating money and buying, investing in higher insurance coverage when they don't need it. So it's a little bit of a protection for you. So good place to learn is when you need certain pieces of information. It can help you. You could bid for something without the prerequisite insurance as long as you have it by contract award. So all good to know. Scoring again is another quick way to I think figure out if the opportunity is aligned with your company and your solution design, but also if you're going to be able to compose compelling responses to the quality methodology. So the evaluation criteria will be contained within every ITT. It's an integral part. I would be baffled and astonished if there isn't evaluation criteria of some vi variety within a tender pack. Now, these signpost buyers' priorities to you, they tell you what they're looking for and the lens through which they're going to be evaluating your responses. So you need to read them. You need to know what you're up against, what you're bidding into, and what buyers' priorities are, where these lie. Okay, so they're crucial. The same question, an identically worded question, can and should be responded to very differently depending on the evaluation criteria. Now, some look for capability and capacity, so you'll need to demonstrate resource levels, accreditations, company certifications, etc., demonstrating your ability, your capabilities. Others look for responses to be substantiated with evidence, or that the supplier's response leaves no doubt that that they're the right people for the job. There is no risk, there is no doubt in the buyer's mind. And some, as we get more into the 2024, 2025, into the new Procurement Act, some request novel and innovative solutions, either in your solution design or your approach. Now, that could be things like working from home, flexible working, to allow you to maintain the highest level of, company resource as you can. Rather than having to let somebody go, you can pop them onto 4 days, let them pick the kids up, whatever it might be. Okay, this flexible working, it's the future. You hear that, Andrew? Now,
Not on my
again,
watch, Alistair. Not on my watch.
these are broad and varied criteria that buyers use to evaluate questions. They will change entirely the complexion of your responses. So like we've said, an identically worded question with different evaluation criteria parameters will spit out completely different answers. So stay attuned to that and have a good read at the evaluation criteria and decide, is this something that we can bid into? Can we be compelling, competitive, as well as compliant? Now,
Alistair, I was just gonna
please.
chip in on that point. The bit around in terms of looking at the scoring and the responses. There's also the element of saying, well, even if we can deliver the solution that they're looking for, we need to make sure, like, are we considering actually, like, do we have the time available in terms of actually response creation? So are we in a position to respond uh, to a standard that's likely to give us a chance of success within the time frame that we have? So actually understanding, based on the questions and the scoring, how much of a task is it to complete this versus how long we've got left versus how much available resource versus what people are already committed to do. Does that actually fit in terms of actually the process of completing this project of submission, as well as the piece around being able to do? So it's just another layer to consider for your go no go. Is like, everything could be perfect about the opportunity, but if it's 2 days out and it's going to take 500 man hours to complete it, you need to consider that in your decision to pursue.
Yeah, absolutely. It's many strings to the bow. So, questions. Given that public sector procurement in the UK is underpinned by these principles of fairness, transparency, integrity, direct communication between suppliers and buyers during a live tender opportunity, it's forbidden. Okay, it can and it will be seen as collusion, or in the very least canvassing, and it's deemed unacceptable in public sector procurement. Big difference between private and public in this regard. So you don't have direct access to buyers. You can't pick up the phone to a procurement department and ask questions about the tender. Now you can do that out with the confines of a live tender opportunity, but when the tender's live, there are very prescriptive modes of communication between yourselves and buyers. So to facilitate this communication, you still do have a channel of communication, but it's through what's called a clarifications log, or a Q&A with the buyer. So this is where questions can be asked of buyers and responses will be provided. However, the process is transparent, so all bidders can see all questions and all responses asked, unless there is a reason why it should be deemed commercially sensitive. Very rare that it happens. It does and it will, but it's quite rare. Buyers will remove suppliers' names, so they'll remove your name from the question that you ask. So only the content can be seen. You can't check your competition by checking the clarifications log, but everything that you ask will be public, will be made public, and the responses will be made available to other bidders. So just keep that in mind, but that's your opportunity to clarify ambiguous or vague statements. Now, I would caveat this by saying don't ask questions that the answers can be found by reading the tender pack. It's really for clarifying ambiguous points, vague points, not really to gain information that should be available, from reading the pack. So use it. You're
That's
owed
it.
this information. Yeah, I see Andrew's hand up. Yeah.
I was just gonna chip in with that. So in terms of doing that, there's a couple of things. So one of the things is there were quite a lot of questions asked in the registration for this webinar about what do we do when tender packs are a bit ambiguous or unclear. So absolutely, the clarification piece is something to think about then. What I was going to say is that like it's worth having a look at a tender pack if there's bits that you don't understand. See if a colleague, without you setting them up in terms of telling them what you think it is, see if they reach the same conclusions if, from reading a bit of it, if they have the same bits that they don't really think are kind of holding true or are not clear. And if you both agree, like actually that's not clear, that is ambiguous, then you can ask the clarification. And I would say it's worth kind of you can pursue it and make it clear that if you think there are ambiguities around the spec, especially, like I would be inclined to be reasonably firm in terms of the language of the clarification question to say um, this this section or this aspect of the specification is ambiguous, or this bit and this bit are potentially contradictory. Please revise, or please can you confirm what this supposed, or provide more details, etc. What you don't want to be in a situation where you're trying to second guess the ambiguity when you're actually constructing your responses. So do be a bit persistent in terms of those clarifications. I've worked with clients on more than one occasion where we've persisted asking clarification questions because things were either contradictory or really unclear, and several occasions it's resulted in actually the the tender pack either being a document being significantly revised and reissued, or actually in a couple of occasions, actually that tender process being pulled and then relaunched at a different point in time because it really wasn't there really was too much ambiguity to proceed. So if that somehow started, you are well within your rights to kind of flag that and try and do what you can to get that properly resolved. You shouldn't have to be putting together responses and submitting it going, I have no idea if this is actually what they want. It's not That's not the procurement working effectively. It's not supposed to be guesswork or trick questions. Something's gone wrong if you feel like that, be it your own knowledge or how the procurement's been structured from the buyer's side.
Yeah, and I think that's so important is to know where you stand and I suppose know your place a little bit is that buyers are asking you to provide a tender submission. You've been asked for this. So you're
Mm.
entitled to clarifying information, you're entitled to ask questions, and we'll get on to this in a little bit, but you're entitled to feedback as well. So that was one of the common themes that we've come up against. So know where you stand on this, and the market has come out to you to request a bid. So you're well within your right to ask these clarifying questions. So use it as a tool. I just would urge caution on using it as a bit of a shortcut if you if you don't want to read the spec in its entirety. But absolutely use it as a tool, and also try and shake yourself of the desire to pick up the phone because you can't. You're not allowed to, and it may harm your bidding chances. So we'll tie this up quite quickly. Point 5, compliance matrix. This is a tool that you would use once you've made a firm commitment to bid. So maybe a little bit after the process of reviewing the tender documents, but certainly once you've made a firm commitment to bid, a compliance matrix, it's so important. And it allows you to remember key points without wading through the entire tender pack again. Okay, so take note of a document, page, paragraph numbers, and it allows you to come back to just pertinent pieces of information without wading through the whole pack again. I also, when I'm using this for quality submissions to compose quality responses, I'll leave a few words on how I want to build a point into that. So, client has requested experienced operatives. So I'll put a little note, say, find out staff retention for the last 12 months, find out average length of service, and if these are, positive stats, use them and tie it in. So you've left a little note of the point, but I'll always leave myself some breadcrumbs on what it is I wanted to say about that point and how I feel we could tie in. So hopefully as a whistle stop little first couple of steps, this should get us off the marks.
What I'm going to try, if this is going to work, I'll see if the tech and my skills are up to this. What I'm going to try and do is, obviously, as practice, we've got a number of platforms that we actually run or that government bodies use. So what I was trying to do in prep was to go into register for a tender opportunity on a portal and just talk you through very quickly the kind of thought process that I would use if I'm confronted with multiple tender documents. Is that working, Alistair? Can everyone see?
Yeah,
Is it like
yeah.
the big long list?
Mhm.
So this is just a random opportunity I've got into that was on Pro Contract. I've registered my interest in the opportunity, so I've got access to the page on the portal where this procurement exercise is being run from. This is a real procurement, but it's our product, so it's fine for me to show. So on this, what you're seeing is the headline information about when the opportunity is going to complete, and for the purposes of this, what we're most interested in is looking at these documents. This one. This is a pretty long document list. It's a kind of construction refurbish. I think it's like a library. Is it a library yeah, a library refurbishment. So typically things in the construction realm, they do have pretty epic document packs. So if you're operating in a different sector, or if you're new to this, you might be like, oh my gosh, am I really going to be confronted with 30 odd documents every time I try and do this? If you are, and one of the things Alistair talked about was like, how do I quickly start to interrogate things? And one of the things that we have a lot of experience doing when clients ask us to support on opportunities, we need to understand really quickly if they're not suitable for them. You want to get really good at ruling opportunities out without going down the line of spending a lot of time and effort in terms of research. So this type of thing, I'm obviously just mirroring what Alistair had said. I'm going to look for the ITT document, which I can see is there, buried kind of two-thirds of the way down. I'm also going to understand, well, like, tell me, is there something, this is really complicated. There's loads of documents here. What else can I find? I've got a tender summary document. I'm going to have a look at that. I've got another tender summary document. I'm going to want to look at that. What else have I got? I've got probably a general specification document. I'm going to want to look at that. That type of thing. If there's one that's got specifics, a tender response document, that type of stuff, I'd look for those. Some of the more detailed contracts or risk assessments or design assessments or list of equipment, that's going to be stuff I'm going to look at in a second or third phase. But for my first phase, I can just look at these sort of first ones, these documents that I flagged there, and I'm going to be able to spin through those ones, and that's going to give me my first pass in terms of, look, is the sort of stuff they do at the scale they want the sort of stuff we as an organization do? Hopefully in the ITT, or if there's another document or like that, there's going to be some stuff around, are there minimum requirements that I need to meet in terms of qualifications, standards, accreditations, minimum turnover that Alistair referenced before. I want to spin through as much of this mandatory type stuff. If there's a specific document around the selection questionnaire, around those questions, there might be some of those. I want to interrogate those, spin through those, not answer them, but I want to look through those SQ questions so that I can understand, actually, are there some of these that are absolute roadblocks, that are absolute stoppers for me and will prevent me going forward? So it's that type of thinking. Okay, well, I want to get really good at ruling things out really fast. Okay, and I probably do it more than most, because I'm doing this for clients all the time. And if we're not going to support them, I need to very quickly be able to go back to them and say, guys, can you do this? Like, how does this look for versus your organization? And they'll say, okay, actually, no, we can't go for that because we don't have X, Y, and Z. So that we're doing that before. candidly before we're taking any before we're engaged in any paid work for anyone. So we need to get really efficient at doing that. And likewise for you internally doing the exact same exercise, you want to get really, really good at going, there's just no way we can do this, and move on to the next opportunity. So just to give you a little bit of an insight into the thought process that you use when you're confronted with these documents, don't go through them like in the sequence that they're listed there. You don't need to go through them all as a first pass. So from just looking at the ones that I've mentioned and skimming through those really quickly, I'll be able to make a first judgment about in and out, and then I can go into that next level of analysis. But by the end, really, if I'm going to pursue an opportunity, I need to actually have at least laid eyes, or someone needs to have laid eyes on every single document to check there's nothing that's a roadblock. But I can do that in phases, and that first phase is what I've talked through there. You're going to be able to do that quickly with a bit of time and practice. We're back. Right, so these are some of the questions that came in. Alistair, how do you feel about how do you quickly eliminate unsuitable tenders? I touched on that a little bit. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more, and I'll see if I can see if my tech skills will allow me to find some questions that some people might have asked to add into the live section too.
Yeah, yeah, let's do it. I think we've both maybe touched on it, but it's a good topic to get into. There are quite a few questions on this, so it is quite foundational. I think the bid no bid document or variations of the document, you'll need to domesticate that to your own company's activities, but I think that's a good formal, consistent, and predictable way to come to a decision on whether or not you should be bidding or not for an opportunity. The questions within the bid no bid decision matrix and questions that you'll add yourself, they can only be answered yes or no really, or they should be, and it should give you a bit of a feeling on whether or not you should be going for this. So again, we've spoken about exception reporting. The way that I think Andrew does it, certainly the way I used to do it when I was in-house, was as soon as I find the first red flag, check with an adult, and if if the director says no, bin it. So quite often, quite commonly, out of hours on call resources, some companies just don't want to deal with it, don't have the capacity to deal with it. So if you see in a tender opportunity there's a 24/7 out of hours on call requirement, bin it, move forward, move on to the next one. Again, levels of insurance, this comes up quite a lot, and in a previous role we were always butting heads with buyers because they were looking for exorbitant levels of insurance each and every instance. Now, our coverage did us in the aggregate, so over an annual period, and it was a large amount of insurance. So we couldn't see the commercial need for the council or the local buying authority to have or to require that much insurance. What I would say, instead of automatically binning it on something like insurance, use the clarifications log and ask the buyer, would you consider insurance in the aggregate? Now, this is such a specific example. I've kind of gone in, you know, quite hard here on this point, but certainly if there's something that could be changed, if there's something that's at the discretion of the buyer, feel free to use the clarifications log and find out if they'll bend on it. If the answer is no, just move out, just move away from it. Another point as well, when I was in private sector, was payment terms, buyer payment terms. Now we're pretty well protected as suppliers in the public sector. They're quite fair. They tend to be 30 days. But again, that was something that I'm used to scrutinising, was okay, well, what are the payment terms? 90 days? Don't think so. So just move on. Now, I will caveat this by saying that this is a luxury for some industries, construction, IT, domiciliary care, where there are broad opportunities. There's always tender opportunities for these sectors. If you're more specialized or niche, you may need to compromise a little bit more, with there being fewer opportunities to pursue. So don't let me tell you how to run your businesses, but certainly if you're finding fewer opportunities, then it may be a case of having to find a bit of a compromise. Anything you would add to that, Andrew?
No, no, I think that's comprehensive. Yeah, really good. Should we? What about? I think we've touched on it again, but again, there are a lot of questions on it. The piece around about thoroughly interpreting the documents. Sorry, thoroughly
Yeah,
interpreting the questions. Sorry, Alistair.
Yeah, the question. So I think this is more to do with quality submissions, the quality envelope, rather than the supplier questionnaire. So again, I think the biggest signpost that you will get for these opportunities is the evaluation criteria. They should marry the question, and they change as well, which is why it's so important. It's one of the key things, the evaluation criteria, that you do read every time because they will change. And I think that gives you the context as to how we should be responding to these questions. It might peel away some layers of what the buyer's priorities are as well. So it's always good to know that. And certainly we've touched on this in a previous webinar. I'm not going to go into the full details of it, but from my own research, a central theme of these quality questions is risk. How do we manage, mitigate, and remove risk from our contracting operations for the benefit of the client? Public sector buyers, they just want a safe pair of hands. They want a safe pair of hands who's going to deliver good quality, not hurt anybody, invest a little bit in the community, move on to the next job. Okay, so if you're struggling to interpret or interrogate these questions, or if you just simply cannot make top nor tail of what the buyer's asking you, ask through the clarifications log. And if you're no further forward and you are going to take a punt at it, risk. Think about how your solution design de-risks the project for the client, and you won't go far wrong. That's my go-to if I'm ever struggling for content is how are we going to de-risk this for you?
There's it's a bit of a piece of it in terms of interpreting the questions. I know it comes up a bit in terms of if you go back and forth on the clarifications and there's still that uncertainty. I suppose there's a piece around like do we do we feel like we're able to answer them well enough to justify the effort that it's going to take to construct the responses? So if you're sat there and you're like, this doesn't make sense, or I don't understand what it is that they want, I suppose it's painful, but there's a question to go, how well positioned am I to win this work? How likely am I to win this work if I'm saying I don't actually understand what it is they're asking, what the questions are asking, which a lot of times will specifically relate to what does my solution design look like? What am I actually proposing to do? It doesn't feel like a strong position. So, um, if you look through and you go, well, are we not understanding these questions because they're ambiguous, or because they're looking at it from a different perspective, or they're looking for a different expertise than we have? It's worth trying to reflect on that and really analyze it to say, okay, well, actually, how does this impact our chances of being successful, and have we figured that in, considered that as part of our go no go decision, which is why when you're talking about interpreting the pack and choosing to pursue opportunities, Alistair spoke earlier on about actually, you need to look at those questions in a fair bit of detail to determine that it is the right opportunity for you. So it can be that you need to be pretty brutal and go, well, actually, based on that, I'm not sure I'm seeing how we can be confident this is a good fit opportunity. So it can be required to be a bit ruthless about things on occasion as well. Um, I guess it's a bit of a hot topic. I don't mind just jumping in and answering the sort of fourth bullet there. There's quite a lot of chat about AI. So the question there, or there were a couple of different questions on AI. Do you suspect AI will influence future tender submissions? The way that question is phrased, will AI influence future tender submissions? AI will already be influencing tender submissions, because you will be getting some organizations will already be using AI to support different aspects of their tender response process or life cycle. What people typically think of when they're thinking about AI is they're talking about, like drafting, like content generation. So people are thinking, um, who people are getting AI to write their responses. That's a big piece, and it's fraught with some difficulty, and that's what authorities seem to be interested in having a visibility of, having an understanding of, um, making you declare if you've done it or not. But AI AI is a way to do things more efficiently and can be used at various points to carry out various actions along the sort of spectrum of activities that you would reasonably do. So it can help you with research, it can help you with idea generation, it can help you to analyze and extract key information from documents. Um, all of that, it can help you to organize and prepare evidence, for example. It can help you to pull bits and pieces, research pieces from your own bank of evidence or data. All of these type of things in themselves, all the examples I've mentioned, it would be it will not reflect specifically as it's not AI that's written the end content that goes into the bid. So it can help in a huge number of ways without it actually reflecting in terms of AI has drafted any of the written responses. The bit that people tend to be most concerned about is AI has written this response, but AI is much more has much more kind of wider application amongst the process, but it's not going to fix everything. It's a guide, it's a support. It's not going to do things end to end for you. Some buyers are already making you state asking the question whether or not AI has played a part in your response, and I think more often than not they're looking for that relation to the actual sort of written content that you're putting in rather than the background work that it might have done. The thing is, if AI has written responses, you're still obligated to make sure that it's factually accurate. But that's already a requirement, like whether or not it's been machine written or it's been written by a person. You cannot put stuff in your response that you know not to be true. You can't make claims about what you've done or what you will do that you know not to be true. That's nothing to do with AI as a standalone piece. But the concern is the term is hallucinations, isn't it? AI likes hallucinations. So it can produce things that sound plausible but are completely wrong. So I think that's the concern from a buyer's perspective. But you're still going to be obligated to make sure everything you put in is factually accurate and it reflects how you will deliver solutions, etc., whether or not it's AI or not. So I think people are getting a little bit concerned about it, but it's part of there's already kind of mechanisms in place to sort of say, you have to put factual content, it has to be accurate. And if you've just used AI and plucked something, buyers are worried about it, but actually, if it's if it's just stuff plucked from the internet, it's not going to reflect what you do. It's not going to be based on what the buyer's actually looking for. It's not going to have any evidence about how you're going to deliver it. So it's going to be rubbish anyway. Even if it's not true, it's still going to be rubbish, and it's going to be marked poorly as such. So there's a little bit more nuance to it as well. Just conscious of time, there have been a few. There's a couple of really interesting comments that have come in relating to um, from the participants. So I thought it's just worth putting these up because they're really good. They're comments more than questions, but it's just again not just us saying it, but kind of what your peers that are working in this space are saying. So just read out the top one. We were recently considering a tender where there was a mention of TUPE. The clarification question response when we asked for further information was that they can't offer any information as we need to seek our own legal advice. After signing an NDA, they finally shared. So, if you have, so this is a really interesting point, and TUPE is a minefield, to be honest, within bidding. So for anyone that doesn't know, it's about the existing staff that are working on the contract that would be transferred over to you if you're successful in winning the work. The idea that you could take them on without understanding their salaries, their job specification, job roles, what their contracts look like, how many hours they're working. The idea that you can reasonably make a judgment about whether or not you can profitably deliver that contract is crazy. You'd have to have that information to be able to make that decision. So, yeah, it would be a red flag. And if they'd said no, we're just not telling you, really, unless you're prepared to take an awful lot of risk, you kind of have to walk away from that opportunity or seek legal advice to challenge their decision to not give you that information because it could be they've got dozens of people on enormous contracts. There's no way you're going to be able to deliver a financially sound service with the burden of having to take those on. You just can't do it blind. And the other point that was raised there was we always aspire to read the documents carefully, but are always up against in terms of tenders that come out with minimum time to complete. And this is the thing. So best practice, how much of it can we adopt and absorb within a time frame? Decoding some of the tenders is such a challenge. They can be written in a confusing way with ambivalent information in different parts of the tender, and then the clarifications confuse the issues even more challenging. Totally agree. Totally agree with that. Um, and it's why you need to try and front load that work in terms of looking at opportunities, deciding whether you're gonna pursue them, have a mechanism, a process, maybe even a system like Tenders Direct in place if you're not already, to make sure you're getting early visibility of opportunities, to give you enough time to establish whether you can pursue them, to do your resourcing, all that type of good stuff. If you're getting in situations and the clarification questions are confusing things even more, it is worth taking that step and going, actually, we either need to persistently ask this in a different way, really put them in a bit of a straitjacket in terms of how you're phrasing the question so that you get that clarity. If you don't have it prepared, you have to be prepared at points to sort of walk away from that too. There was another question that came up that was just to flag because we talked about, Alistair, you'd mentioned there about really being cut off in terms of you cannot pick up the phone and ask the buyers once the procurement has gone live. So the question was, do we see this changing with the new regs, which include collaborative dialogue, or will that still be undertaken as a clarification? So just for clarity, what they've done is they've amalgamated all of the different procedure types under a banner heading. It's negotiated competitive procedures, I think it's called, if my memory doesn't abandon me, and just an open procedure. So open procedures are staying as is. All the other ones have been pulled under this umbrella term. So all the things like collaborative dialogues, negotiation, competition, all that type of stuff has been lumped under one banner, and it means actually that the authorities can choose the type of procurement path that they want to put up that's going to be suitable and best fit for that specific opportunity. So in those situations, which will be clearly marked within the documents, there may well be an opportunity for that kind of engagement or for a dialogue. And actually the grounds for that, or the process or the stages for that, will be clearly laid out within the tender documents before you decide to pursue that opportunity. So anything other than an open opportunity or an open procedure, you will see there will be a sort of chosen procurement pathway that the authority is chosen, that they're choosing to use, and it will clearly lay out like what are the kind of conditions or how that's going to work. And it might say that there are opportunities for dialogue or for meeting during that process, but it will be explicit. The vast majority of procedures are going to run as the vast majority of open opportunities are going to run as open procedures, which you only have the clarification mechanism once that's live. So be aware of it. Make sure you understand what procedure you're bidding into. But the vast majority of the time, what we've said about clarification questions being the only mechanism will be what applies, and you won't be able to deviate from that. So it's again another point about making sure we read and interrogate the documents to be really clear on how that's going to work, and if that opportunity for dialogue during the process will exist. The vast majority of times it actually won't exist, so you only have that clarification mechanism to use. But again, that will always be stated in the documents itself. Okay. And I think that's pretty much rounded us off. If anyone's not downloaded it as yet, we do have the Go No Go template that's available. You can click on that and get that just now. Anyone that's been on the webinar that's put up with us for this lovely 45 minutes, you can contact us if anyone's and we can do a follow-up 30-minute consultation, just see if there's any specific issues that you have you want to talk through. Do just let us know. You can do that, and I'll put the link up in a second to do so. We've also got training courses which are really excellent to enhance your knowledge. So we've got those coming up across. We've still got a couple left in December, and then we've got training courses available for January, February, March into next year as well. And anyone that's not a Tenders Direct subscriber, I know some on the call aren't, you can sign up for a trial as well and get access to all public sector opportunities. Make sure you're getting that full visibility and try out the system. If you do want to have a follow up, punch it in the chat, punch it in the questions, or you can contact us directly on the email that's there, bidsupport@tendersdirect.co.uk, or just give us a ring on that phone number. So if you do want to have that sort of 30-minute consultation with myself or Alistair, we'd be delighted to carry on and dive into some of the more specific issues you might have around tender documents or just generally your approach to bidding and so on. Happy to go through that as well. Slightly over time. It's a bit of a theme for us, but we're close, Alistair. We were close. I'm taking the blame
Getting
for
there.
that at the end for running over, but I think that's a great place to leave it. It was a really high level of attendance and participation. If you want to ask us a question or we didn't get onto your question, do drop us a note. We'll try and get back to you on all the questions as well. Reach out for some feedback around the webinar as well. But I think that's probably a good point to call it a day for now. So for myself, thank you very much for coming along to the webinar. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with everyone, and we hope you take away some value, some food for thought. The slides are coming to you shortly, or the webinar recording is, so you can rewatch in your own time as well. Alistair?
Yeah, thank you for your interest from myself as well. And if you want a conversation, if there's anything we can support with, do please get in touch.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, guys, and we'll catch you on the next webinar, which will be the other side of the new year. So welcome, or happy holidays to everyone when it comes, and we'll see you in 2025. Thanks again.